Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Discourse in Magic, specifically episode 120 with Jason Ladanye. This is a super cool episode because Jason not only studied with Darwin Ortiz for many years, but he is a big fan of these major topics that we talk about on this podcast. Things like theory, things like practice and scripting and tension and all of these different ideas. So if those sort of things resonate with you, then you're really going to love episode 120 with the Jason Ladanye. Here we go. So we'll start the way that we start everything, which is, how did you get into magic? How did you start this thing?
Well, when I was about 7 years old or something, my brother's room was like a mecca of just cool things. There was a pool table in there, and he had like golf stuff and Matchbox cars, and it was just like the greatest thing ever. And he had a deck of cards in there. And I remember I used to sneak in there and play with all of his stuff all the time. And he used to like put padlocks on the door, and I would like find a way to climb up outside the house and go into the window and everything. But I always enjoyed sneaking into his room and playing with all this cool stuff. And he had a deck of cards in there, as I said. And one day he had shown me a card trick, and it was the four jacks that go into four different rooms and four different apartments. And the one stays on top as a lookout, and he knocks on the top, and the four jacks that were buried in the deck come up to the top. And as a 7-year-old kid, I just knew that, that broke all the rules of how the world works. And I couldn't solve it. So it's fascinating. So that was one of the first magic experiences that I had. It's kind of like your grandfather pulling a quarter out of your ear, but it was much cooler. So that sparked the interest in magic. And of course, I lived, at the time when I was 7, our family lived above a library. If you maintained the library, you got to live upstairs for free. So I had access to magic books and things like that down in the stacks. And so that brought it up a whole nother level. And then I think I saw the first magic special on TV was the David Copperfield special when he walked through the wall. And when I saw that, something in my brain just I changed forever. I knew then at 7, like, this is what I want to do for a living. No more astronaut stuff or firefighter stuff or this. I want to do this.
David Copperfield will do that to you.
Yeah, and I followed through with it. It just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So I went to see a magic shop, and I started getting all the gaffs and all the little things and odds and ends. And by 10 years old, I was doing kids' birthday parties. I was charging $10 to do a kid's birthday party. And there we are.
Well, it's good to hear a what I will call a classic story. You know, an older brother or uncle or cousin or something did a trick, and then it's a little bit of a propel into the world until you see one of the best, and then you're stuck, and then
until you get hooked.
Exactly, you've got the bug, and
I like this idea that it's always something small, and then maybe you see a pro. And then you start doing all magic, and then you sort of find your home. Yeah. You said that you were doing kids' birthday parties, so I'm assuming you weren't doing close-up card technician work.
No, I did. You're right. I didn't really think about it until I just spoke to you guys now, but I did take that kind of classic arc where when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. I bought stuff and did it because it had a moment. And then you learn, it took me like 30 years to figure this out, but you start to learn magic theory and understand it better, and you start to hone in on what your one craft is. In other words, I found what I am. I found my thing, and I do that well. And I'm crystal clear on what that is. And when you're 7, you don't go, oh, well, I read Strong Magic over the weekend. And so anyway, I figured out what I was. So back then at 7 or 10 or 15, all those ages there. And I only did kids' birthday parties when I was like 10, 11 years old. I don't do them. Even when I was 15, I realized that's not what I wanted to do. But I just did everything. I got the stuff at the magic shop, and I did the cups and balls and sponge balls and all sorts of little moments. So it was kind of like parlor magic. It wasn't, I wasn't cutting anybody in half yet. But it certainly wasn't hardcore card technique by any means. It was just the stuff that I bought at the store. But that was how that all started.
So walk us through a little bit of the journey that goes from there, from doing kids' birthday parties and catching the bug and sort of knowing that this is what you do to where you are now. So specifically how you then found a love for cards and what you did to double and triple down on that.
Yeah, well, what I realized, and again, too, when I was young, I didn't have all the technical terms yet. I didn't know what I was experiencing until later in hindsight when I look back. But practicality was the issue. I knew that, when I brought some sort of thing to school to show kids, I put the pencil through the quarter, and then 10 kids would jump on top of me and beat the crap out of me until they ripped the thing out of my hands and broke it and said, here's how this works. So I didn't like the gaff stuff because you could always get caught. No matter, and this is still true today. If you do something amazing with something, people are going to want to see it. That's how the world works. So I never liked that idea of having some evidence on me that I could get caught with. And when I started working with a deck of cards, I realized that if your sleights are clean, you end clean and you're still clean, So I like that freedom of I can do anything and you can't catch me. It's all just stuff you can't see. It's hours of practice is my gaff, So I realized when I was younger that I didn't like having to bring all this stuff with me. I always, people would say, oh, you do magic, show me something. And I'd go, oh, well, I don't have any of my stuff. How stupid is that? I'm saying that I have these magical abilities, yet I can't prove anything. So I started realizing that when I would perform, I got one moment out of these tricks that I buy. It had one bullet in it, So once I shot that bullet, it was useless. And I realized that when I had a deck of cards, I had lots of things I could do. I had the Triumph stuff. I had Oil and Water. I had Out of This World, things like that. And I felt like I had lots of routines that I could do with a deck of cards. And that's where it kind of started. I said, well, this is the practical one. This is the one I can put in my pocket. And when somebody says, can you do something? I can open it up and do a show. And I also might say what got me into strong magic to begin with. And again, I didn't know it was strong magic, but one of the very first books I got, it's on my shelf over. The Magic Handbook was one of the first magic books I ever got from, it was like a birthday present from my mom or something. And it had Out of This World in it. So here's an 8-year-old kid, taking a deck of cards and handing it to a spectator and having them divide all the reds and the blacks. I mean, that was getting people's attention. Yeah. So I could sense like, wow, this gets such a bigger reaction when I do this card trick instead of anything else in my repertoire. So why would I bother doing that stuff?
Yeah. And sometimes with cards, you have like what you're saying, where an effect is so grandiose, like it's so rich to be able to separate the reds and the black cards that it feels like it beats out anything you could do with a coin. You can make it disappear, appear, change colors, and then you're running out of one moment. And I feel like Out of This World, half the cards are red, half the cards are black. You think about it, you're like, then every one must have been correct. It's just such a richer trick. So I can see what you're saying by that.
And not having any definitions for this stuff. You know what I mean? I had I just knew people have a profound reaction to this. And you're right. If you take a
not to put down coin magic, but
yeah, exactly. The dots off the polka. Remember the polka dot can thing? That's a nice visual little slap, but they don't lay in bed that night after the show, the spectator staring at the ceiling in agonizing pain, thinking, "How did those polka dots get off of that can?" And they don't think that, but they will think about that. They held those cards themselves. And I had no influence. I had nothing to do with that trick, the way I presented it. I mean, I'm hands off the whole time, and they do all of the work. And at the end, the audience is forced to believe that they did that. I don't want to turn this podcast into how great Out of This World is, but it really stands the test of a great magic. And you're right. And the clarity is another thing that I really enjoyed. It wasn't all muddled up with lots of different things. It's a crystal clear premise.
So let's keep going on the journey. You sort of found the richness in card magic and you sort of gravitated towards it, stopped wanting to buy props and tricks and things, and you wanted to work more on sleights because sleights can be hidden and sleights can't be ripped out of your childlike hands.
That very nice, my small childlike hands.
Right, your small childlike hands. So from there, then what? How did you dive deeper into card magic?
Well, yes, to just to finish your point there, though, it was also something very gratifying about not being able to do something and then learning it and being able to do something craft wise. Like, look, I did this with my own hands. And I also was at the time was taking piano lessons, and I noticed the same thing. You know, Wednesday of the first day of the month, I couldn't play the song. And then Wednesday in the next week, I could play the song. And I was like a little magic trick for a 7-year-old too. Like, my hands won't do this. Like, and you explain to your teacher, I can't do it, bro.
And she's like, yet.
Yeah. And then like you keep screwing it up and you keep screwing it up and and then one day you wake up and it's there. And it's like, how did that happen? Now, I didn't know that was my subconscious continuing to work on it, even though I wasn't sitting at a piano, that stuff. And slights were the same. I felt like I couldn't do this shift or I couldn't do this thing or whatever. And, you know, one day you wake up and it's there, and that's very gratifying to do that. And what wasn't gratifying was spending $18 for some trick that blew my mind. I remember being behind the counter at the magic shop going, that is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. There is no way that's possible. You cannot put a steel ball through a deck of cards. Not possible. And then you get it at home and you go, oh, this piece of plastic is what made, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. There's a little plastic tab here and this is garbage. And so over and over and over and over again, I buy little pieces of plastic or little gaps or little,
and you know what'll never let me down? 52 pieces of cardboard.
yeah, exactly. So exactly because they can't take there is no little cheap piece of plastic taped to the inside of the deck, you know.
And it's not even just, you know, the idea that you're using something that you paid for and like there's the audience could figure it out because there is a gimmick involved. It's also the, gratification involved with accomplishing something. It's the difference between having, liposuction and working out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You just took my analogy. That's exactly what I was going to. Well, so what? So I eat donuts all year long, and then every year some guy sucks all the fat out. There's something different about working every day and doing it right, and you just feel like you really have something. It's real, and that's a nice thing to have. It's the difference. Another good analogy for me. It's the guy that started out dirt poor family and worked his way up to a millionaire. Now you compare that to a guy that just found a lotto scratch off ticket and was rich his whole life and got a scratch off ticket and won another couple $1 million. There's something different about feeling like you've earned it. And when you look at all the things that you own and how comfortable you are in life, it just feels better to have accomplished everything the hard way, in my opinion. Anyway.
And you grow to love the way that cards feel in your hand, and then it's over, and then it's game, and it's like a tool belt, right? So this becomes the way in which you see magic and the world and everything. It's your tool belt. So like a worker, you're like, oh, you could use this tool for that, and they're like, but these are the tools that I use, the ones that are sitting on my belt. These are the ones that I know how to do everything with. And
everyone's tool belt is different. So we talked about that a moment ago. So there's nothing against people that do gaff work, or if you love the polka dot trick, I'm sorry. But, that's in your tool belt. So that's fine. And what I also appreciated was what you said about I'd wake up in the morning and open up a brand new deck of cards and look forward to a full day of practice. It was very gratifying. Mm-hmm. What I also like is I can do my whole show. I can do my entire show. I can run to CVS and have somebody pay I've done this before. I've been out in situations where people find out that I do what I do and I don't have any of my stuff on me and there's a CVS across the street. I tell them, I say, you go across the street, buy any deck you want that says bicycle on it or B, and bring it back here and I'll do some stuff on this pool table here or whatever. And then I can do a full 40-minute set with a regular deck of cards. And it is a killer routine with presentations and premise and progression. The show keeps getting more impressive as we go, and it's all just a regular deck of cards. So if I ever have to fly overseas and they completely lose my luggage, if I ever have to go to something and all my stuff gets stolen or whatever, I can still do my whole show.
Yeah, there's something gratifying about that. I was just actually talking to someone else about it today, where I'm just holding my hand out. There's a deck of cards sitting in my hand, and I'm like, this is it. This is it. Like this is everything. This cardboard is what makes my living. Like other people might they might make their living with their
computers
or whatever, some software or whatever. And for me, this is the cardboard that makes my living, like.
We all have our tool belts. Give Dave Roth take some spare change out of your pocket and give it to Dave Roth. He'll have the same thing. So yeah, it doesn't matter.
And I'm sure that is another level of gratifying of all the same things. You can change coins. Everyone has coins on them, and everyone. So to each person their own. So keep going on the journey. So once you knew it was cards, you have all these reasons why. What did you do to put yourself there? Did you seek out mentors? Did you?
So I was just a normal Magic kid buying Magic garbage and everything when I was maybe 10 to 15 or so was all those trips to the Magic shop. And I used to start buying books because I realized, I spend $15 and I get the one thing, or I buy this book over here and there's 60 routines in it or something. So I started to see the value in books. And remember, I came from a pretty poor family. So this was me mowing lawns for $6 to save up $20 to go to the Magic shop. Every time I got $20, I'd go Mom, can I go to the Magic shop? So I needed that value. I was always so let down. I mowed 600 lawns for needle through balloon. And when I would buy a book, I got so much more value. So the first book I bought, and it's going to make sense when I say it, but the first book I bought was Expert Card Technique. So I'm not, I'm not going into Mickey Mouse magic here. I got into some pretty heavy technique at a pretty young age. So I liked the card thing. I liked the different premises and plots because I knew even when I was younger, the pick a card thing was going to get old. Even though the avenue I took was different, they all started out the same and ended the same. So I knew I had to keep changing it up. So Expert Card Technique, there was Ace Assemblies. I started buying books that had different things in there. And I was like, ooh, this is, and I didn't know it, but it was premise. I had new premises to work with. At the time. So that led me to starting to go for people that just did card magic. And Martin Nash was the first, I remember Hank Lee's, I went into those catalogs and found the Martin Nash book in it, or DVD set, the DVD Charming Cheat series there. And I ordered that and my brain that was a whole new level of you mean this guy's doing 6 hours of card tricks? This is the greatest thing ever. So I locked myself in my room for 2 years and watched Martin Nash. And again, too, being younger and not having proper definitions to use, but I didn't know why I liked Martin so much, but it was because he had a character. He had such a well-defined character. This wasn't just a guy doing tricks and fooling you. This was an old Mississippi riverboat gambler guy. And, he bet on horses, he bet on this, he bet on that. So I was starting to see that character, the way he dressed and his, who does poetry when they perform? There was something different about his character that I really appreciated. And again, all premise. He could do, a half-hour thing with 6 different tricks, completely different premises. And I was really intrigued by that. So that got me into that, where I said, hey, you know what? Maybe I could just do cards because this is kind of cool. And I can do these big shows. I don't have to carry anything around and look at this kind of material. And then that led me to going back to the old catalog and saying, well, who else can I get that has some card work here? And I found Darwin Ortiz's stuff. And when I found Darwin's stuff, I popped that old VHS in the thing there and started watching him shuffle cards. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, he really shuffled the cards there.
Right. What is going on?
Yeah. And then when he spread the cards and they were all still in order, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because I saw him shuffle the cards. Or when he'd pull a card out of his wallet, well, I'd say, well, I never saw that. He never palmed the card, so how can that be? And sure enough, he was just getting all the new moves that I knew right past me because the technique was so strong. Yeah, and that was a whole new level of oh my God, I know nothing. So that danger, when a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. So I'm 15 years old going, I'm a card expert. I mean, look at me. And then I saw Darwin and realized I knew nothing. I just knew nothing. And I met Darwin. I'm skipping over a big part of the story, but I saw the DVD that I had bought at the time. And on the back, there was a phone number and I thought it was the production company. So I was going to call A1 Multimedia and just thank them for putting out a nice product, talking to the receptionist or something. And Darwin answers the phone and I'm 5 minutes of stuttering and, oh my God, do you know who you are kind of stuff. And he let me calm down. And I said, your stuff is amazing. So he said, we'll try a session. And if you show me that you're willing to work on this stuff, perhaps we could do another one. And I saved up all the money I could and drove 8 hours down to see him. And he showed me some stuff. And that was the beginning of a, 15, 20-year relationship, but that was my mentor.
So talk a little bit about that, because I know you talk about the book Strong Magic, and I know that, working with Darwin played a huge role in you and your magic. And, one of the things, just to expand a little bit, but people are talking a lot now about the lack of mentorship happening in magic. It's a little bit of a different magic world now in 2018 than it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Talk a little bit about sort of that relationship and some of the key things that you think you took away.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that inspiration. So I had it with music too. When my piano teacher would play something, I mean, I had lots of different piano teachers, but once I got past like the old lady helping me out with things, I got a real teacher that went to college and everything. And, they can sit down and play something and inspire you in a way that not everyone else can. It's a real person, and that they've got the knowledge, and also that they've got the correct way to teach you. So teaching is a big part of this too. You can't just say, here, do this. There has to be a process, a correct process, a very careful process to take. And the word that I use, and it's a very powerful word, but you have to surrender. You have to surrender to your mentor completely. So if Darwin says, I need you to shave your head, you don't go, well, that doesn't make any sense. You don't know what you're fucking, that guy has so much knowledge and you have your little 2 years of knowledge. How the hell can you tell him, well, that doesn't make any sense?
And also the time to think about that is after, right? The time after you've done it is when you look back and say, how do I do it now? But you have to learn how to ride a bike the way that you ride a bike.
No pushback. If you push back, you're only pissing off your mentor. That's what's happening. The mentor knows that, and there's a reason he's doing everything. And again, this is a very tender relationship here. So I'm not saying that all mentors just, I can tell half my students to shave their heads now and they'll do it. But it's not the right mentor that understands this. So it's very difficult to find the right one. Once I was able to feel that inspiration from my piano teachers and things like that, I felt that same thing with Darwin. He would do stuff and it would really inspire me. And then he would break it down in a way that I had no idea it could be broken down that far. So in other words, my first, list of things to learn that I brought him was like 200 things long, figuring we could bang out 50 of those in one lesson.
Right.
We talked about one thing. And at first I was disappointed. I'm like, that's all. I drove 8 hours to learn this thing. And I found myself writing about 8 pages of notes on this one thing. It's just a false step. But there was so much more about body language, about relaxing.
And you don't realize, like you said, when you're 15 and starting magic, you're learning all these things and you're just a sponge. You're learning wide and not deep, right? And you don't realize that there could be 10 years and dozens of people's worth of work on a move and taking it to where the move is now at its best. That stuff is unclear when you're very young.
Yeah. At first you think, well, how silly is this? Undercut, side jog, peel off the bottom of the side jog, throw. I mean, what's the big deal? But then you realize that there is on such a deeper level that you can go with this stuff with body language, timing, where do you put this thing, that kind of things, and where on the mat, where are your elbows, where's your chest? Mike Vincent talks about that a lot. Where, the Slidini body language stuff. Are you at a high point? Are you relaxed? Are you leaning back in your chair? It's just millions of these little concepts. And it was so rewarding to find out that there was so much more depth than what I was going for. So I stopped at the anticipation, or that feeling of my expectations of, let's do 30 things today. And I'm like, what one thing can we dig into today? So every 6 months or something, I'd save up enough money again. It was just like the magic shop, but at a larger scale. I just saved up enough money to go back down and learn some more stuff. And basically what happened is he took pretty much everything I had already been doing up to that point and just deleted all of it. And we started over, everything, just got rid of everything. So my false shuffles, my palming, my approach was wrong and everything. So we just kind of one by one, just started over, wiped the slate clean. So that's another thing about the mentor thing is, what if that mentor said, everything you do sucks. We have to start completely over. You could potentially hurt somebody that way because they'd feel like, well, everything I've done is wrong. But the right mentor says, oh, look, everything you're doing is fine. but let's just work on this one thing. Then he fixes that. And then he says, you know what, as a matter of fact, let's just work on this other thing. And then before you know it, 2 years has gone by and you completely are a new person.
You've replaced everything, right?
That was something I wanted to ask you about. Was you've sort of mentioned what it takes to be a good student, but what does it take to be a good magic mentor?
Yeah, it's a very good question. You just have to look at the bigger picture of what this person wants. Look at their goals first. Make sure that your goals, everybody's aligned on the same thing here. And you have to find ways to delicately deliver this information. You maybe the tone that you use is always important, but never say like everything's wrong, even if everything is wrong. It's a person there, so it's a very delicate thing. And if they're surrendering to you, that's a very valuable thing that they're offering you.
Right? You have to respect that.
Yeah, you have to give the right amounts first, and when there's pushback, that's okay. In their universe, they're right. So that's where stereotypes come from. If every time you do something you get hurt, and then your mentor is saying, "Well, I need you to do this," it's going to be very easy for you to say, "Well, no, that doesn't work because every time I do that, I get hurt." But there's a reason that he's saying to do that. Like go out and perform for new people for the first time. And you might say, "Oh, well, I'm no good at that." There's a reason he's saying to go do that. And then you have to have very open communication on both sides. I'll do this with my students sometimes. I'll say, "I'm going to teach it to you this way," which is wrong. It's wrong. We're going to ignore a lot of other things, but I just want you to do this thing for me because I want them to experience just that. And by saying I'm going to add to it later, lets them know that, okay, this is only part of the puzzle here, because people don't learn that way. I can't tell you how to do a second deal in 15 minutes. No. There's far too many concepts to it. So, and if I throw all that at you at one time, the student then becomes overwhelmed and says, well, maybe this isn't for me or something. Mm-hmm. So you just say, a mentor has to know, okay, here's the second deal. I know it inside and out, flawlessly. I can do it perfectly. But I know how to break it down into these 20 steps. Mm-hmm. And each step may take months to learn or whatever. And then they deliver it to you in the right order.
A big part of being a mentor isn't just having the knowledge, but being able to obviously teach the knowledge.
Oh, inside and out.
And like any field, like the most knowledgeable might not be the best teachers. The best teachers might not be but you have to find the ones that resonate with you.
Well, let me make one last point about the mentor thing, because you had asked about it's difficult to find a mentor, but I think the YouTube generation is the problem for why people can't find a solid mentor. Because when you're 12 or whatever, you think, oh, well, let me just go on YouTube and learn. Look, I have exposure to all this stuff. But those aren't real mentors. That's a one-way street coming from the YouTube channel to the person. There's no that communication we talked about isn't earlier. So just to finish that thought, a good way to find a mentor is actually go see somebody perform. Go if you're into magic, go find someone that you like and see them at a theater. See if you can meet them or whatever at a magic meeting or whatever. And if you see what you like and you start out that back and forth kind of, can you help me with some things, and you see some good results, then continue and venture out and take that same process. Maybe move up to different performers as you go through life.
I was going to say, I didn't even really think about that in terms of a generational thing. Like, I remember getting the first computer in my house growing up, but before that, I just asked my parents questions, and then I immediately stopped asking my parents questions about things. Like, we're not used to going to a person as a resource.
We could spend all day talking about interesting things you learned with or from Darwin, but I would love to just find out, just because I know he's had such an incredible impact, not only obviously on card magic and gambling and things like that, but his work on theory. And I know that you, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it later in the episode, but you've got a lot of feelings on theory and premise and character and things like that. So in terms of that realm of things, what's one big thing or one main thing that was an important takeaway or light bulb moment in your years working with Darwin Ortiz about theory or performance or presentation outside of technique?
So here's what it all comes down to. I think so character is a really, really, really big one. And premise is a really, really big one. You have to be able to make sure that your effects have premise and your whole show has premise. Things like progression are very important to let the audience know that things are moving in the right direction. If you watch a movie and it keeps getting better and better and better, you are going to be at the edge of your seat by the end. But 20, 30, 40 minutes into the movie, if it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, you're doing that thing where you're like,
what else is going on?
Do I make it to the end, or do I go pick up my dry cleaning? Because this is really killing me here. So if the audience can sense that more keeps coming, you're going to have an audience that is just totally lost in your show. And that's what you want. That gets you more work. That gets you repeat business and things like that. And it's also very gratifying to finish a show on such a high note, So I learned those things mostly from reading Strong Magic, but anybody can read the book, but what's really nice about having Darwin as a mentor was to take something from that book and go out and apply this for the next 3 months, and then come back and let's reflect on it and see what happened and talk theory with him and say, look, I applied it and this happened and those kinds of things. And there were straight up times. I wasn't the perfect student. There were lots of times that I disagreed. I said, well, that's not you're sorry, bro. But you're off on this one. Scripting is no good. Yeah, I told him once, I can't script this. It's ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe for you that works, but for me, I like it to be live. I like it to be live and punchy and in the moment, and then a month later,
and then he systematically proved that wrong.
Oh my God! And a month later, I'm doing a show and I did an Elmsey count wrong or something, and the whole setup was screwed up, and I was just like, now we're gonna do this with I had nothing because I had to think internally, like, how do I solve this moment here? I've got 50 people watching me and I've got nothing. And I went back to him and I was like, so I tried the scripting thing and it kind of worked because now I've got a consistent good delivery. I don't have to hope I'm on or in a good mood or there's good chemistry because it's scripted. It is going to be good because I've made it good. It's good every time I do it, And the thing that I was missing is that scripting isn't like you just type it and go. It's back and forth, and it's over time you build it. And this was a big breakthrough for me. We write and we talk two different ways. So when we sit down and write, like we're writing for school, we have complete sentences and we have to make sure there's structure and it looks like it's supposed to look for if we were writing for a magazine article or whatever. But we don't talk that way. If I were to actually transcribe what I just said, it would be a horrifically long sentence and it would be all poorly structured. So you have to find this perfect balance of scripting and typing the way you talk so that it does sound natural.
And also one of the things on scripting, just to add to that, is, people envision the term scripting as meaning you sit down with a cup of tea and a pen and a paper and you write your act. And that sounds ludicrous because it is, because that's not how we do anything. And one of the things that I always highlight is the difference between the term and the importance scripting and the process in which you arrive at your script. Like, I think it's okay if the first dozen times you do the trick, it doesn't really have a script, because that'll maybe give you the layout for how you do speak.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So when you sit down with a pen and a paper, you're not just going like, what would I say if I was me doing this show on a stage? You have something to draw from.
Yeah, it's going to give you a horrible script. And that's why kids say that's where I went wrong. I wrote out, when I was back in the day when I was a riverboat Mississippi gambler, and then I tried saying it. And then people are looking at me like, the hell is wrong with this kid? And that's when I would go back to him and say, like, okay, your stupid script didn't work. So what you do is you can type it out to get like talking points, then you do it for real, like your real talking voice, and after you do it 5, 6, 7 times or whatever, the backbone of your thing starts to show up. And then you type that up. And then that's only the beginning. Then it gets refined over the years, the little ad libs, and you say, that one sentence I keep saying, I keep getting tongue tied on these words. So let's refine that a little bit. And then you take it out for another performance and you try that new little sentence and you say, oh, that worked much better. And then it's a process, and they're never done. I'm constantly tweaking my scripts. But the bigger point is when I'm up there delivering my script, it should feel like it's coming out for the first time. You want people in the audience to say, no, I want other magicians out there going, no way that's on script. He's just riffing. No, it is all of those beats and all those moments feel like they're coming out for the very, very first time. And there's a great acting book that one guy talks about. It feels like you're being poked. When one actor says something, it feels like he's poking the other actor, and the other actor has to respond to that poke. I got poked for the first time. Here's my response. And that means it's in the moment. And if they don't have that poking analogy, that poking feel, it just feels like you're delivering words. Okay, he said something, now I said something, now I say something. It has to feel like that was said and it's being received for the very first time. And then the actor can deliver something that seems spontaneous in the moment. And getting to that level is extremely difficult.
I have one other question about working with Darwin before I want to hear about some of the theory and stuff that you have developed and started building on, which is that, strong magic and designing miracles are two of the most influential and effective and important books in card magic and magic theory. And they are, if you go to the Discourse in Magic website, we have a free thing called the Theory Resource Guide. And since we started 2.5 years ago, people can get it. It's totally free. And it gives you 5 or 6 resources that aren't magic, that to help your magic, and then 5 or 6 books to help your magic. And 2 of the books are Darwin Ortiz books, right? Strong Magic and Designing Miracles. And reading those books, like you said, when your eyes were opened, when you went from buying tricks to buying books, my eyes were opened when I went from buying books about tricks to buying books about theory and how to do tricks. And talk to me a little bit about working with him and being able to work through things in that book and being able to, because I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like me reading any of those 2 books as a 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old and being able to say, hey, Darwin, what do you mean by this? Or, hey, Darwin, is there another way? Or is this you know what I mean? So talk a little bit about what that was like.
Well, basically, it came down to I was performing a lot of his material because all of the thinking was correct. All the construction, the template was good. So even though I didn't really know what I was doing yet, all of it, I had the technical stuff down. Basically, with Darwin, it went like technical stuff for like 5 years. Then it went to character, who's your character, what are you, and story and story arc and things like that, and then character and character development. It all kind of happened in that loose order there. So by having a good template to work through, I was able to kind of work on that stuff in a safe environment.
You had the blueprint.
Yeah, and I was able to analyze it without having to worry about creating my own material and trying to do all that at the same time. So I was able to take these moments and these tricks, or the order that the tricks were in, or whatever thing I was trying to work on, and say, oh, I see. But it was because it was already well crafted that I could see this stuff working fine. But eventually, it got around to creating some of my own material, and that was the best way to learn this stuff, because I would bring him something and say, all right, check this out. We got 2 sealed decks of cards. Check them out. Now, I want you to pick either one. Okay, open this one up and now pick a card. And whatever card you pick, it signed, is now in the other thing. The signed card appears in the other sealed box. I mean, that's impossible, right? And you go, okay, why? And I'd go, because it's, it's magic or something.
It's impossible.
And he'd go, why? And I'd go, I don't know, because it gets a great reaction though. And he'd go, I don't care about the reaction. Why is that in there? And then I'd go back home and go, like, look at the reasons why you're doing this. And a story is a great place to dump some of these unjustified actions. So that's what I'm getting at. What are these unjustified things happening? So let me back it up even further and just make a quick analogy with a movie. So a movie starts and all of a sudden the big tractor trailer pulls up and the truck just blows up. The audience would go, okay, all right, well, that was cool, spectacular, but it doesn't mean anything. Now, let's put that in a whole different scenario where there's some poor family and they're struggling or whatever, and they're on their way to the hospital and they're going to get some operation or something, and they've saved up, and we've watched the whole movie, and then all of a sudden they get hit by a truck and it blows up or something. I mean, that means something completely different. We would be absolutely crushed that the journey that this family went through, their entire thing, that we sat with them and their pains and their sufferings and all this, and we are so emotionally attached to these people, and you see the one get out and you go, oh my God, they made it, and all of a sudden it blows up and they die. That'll bring an audience to tears. But it's the same explosion. It's the same thing. It looks the same on TV. So the context was everything. So we started thinking like that in these card tricks and said, how can we justify all these things? Why did that truck blow up? Those things. We have to answer all of those questions. And if we can answer all that stuff and we have justifications and motivations for everything, the audience can follow this crystal clear premise. They can follow who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, how is it beneficial, what good is this thing, and then, oh no, something's gone wrong. well, how can he get out of this? There's no way he can get out of this. Oh, but because he's a world-class card cheat, I see what he did. Even though it's impossible, I see why he did what he did and delivered this amazing result that was beyond our expectations. They have to know who you are. That's the family that was in this car accident. You have to know what their goal is, why, what is going on here. We have to follow them on this journey. We have to, for story to be effective, we need conflict. So we need something in there that goes wrong or some issue. And then we need to solve it. But you can't just solve it. You have to solve it in a spectacular way because we're entertainers. We have to make that exciting and amazing. It wasn't just that the guy, this stupid movie analogy that we're using, it wasn't that they just fell down the stairs and died. Well, that's stupid. We want to make it spectacular. We want to make something hit the camp. We want to visually please our audiences too. So that's why, that little circle, that's classic 8th grade story arc, that's what we're trying to bring, or what I'm trying to bring into every single thing I do. And unless it meets that standard, I'm not doing it.
That is a helpful approach, and I think even just at its base, the question of why and what's all this for is something that people can hold to their heart. And I can feel, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure I'm right. I can feel that you have not done tricks that are awesome because you can't figure out why, right?
Exactly. Haunted Pack. There's no so because I know my character. I know my character inside and out now. So I'm a combination of Tony Stark for the asshole. I'm James Bond for the slickness and the smoothness, the arrogance, the ego. I'm a little bit of Bruce Wayne because it's like the mysterious, what are you kind of a thing. So all of those cliche movie characters, plus a lot of other little things. I mean, when I worked, I taught guitar lessons at a music store. This is 15 years ago, after I got done touring on the road. And there was a store manager that worked there, and he was the biggest con man. He would rip people off with a big, huge smile on his face. And he was silky smooth. Like, I just watch him take somebody for all sorts of money, and he just smile at him and open the door for him when he left. Now, a lot of my character is that guy. I feel myself channeling that guy. I know another guy that was the slickest guy with girls. He was so slick. So some of the things he said, all that's built into my character and things like that. So to get to your point, once you know what your character is and what you are and what you do, it is a great guiding light to tell you, here's the material I'm going to do. So Haunted Pack, like the greatest version of Haunted Pack ever, gaffless, and a royal flush comes out from a shuffled deck of cards or something, I can't do. And this answer is simple because I'm not a supernatural guy. So James Bond does not all of a sudden pull out a orb of light and throw it at his enemy. Superman is the guy that has his supernatural stuff. So he's going to use that. And Bond is going to use his wit and his
gadgets, maybe.
Yeah, things like that. So we have to stay true to that, because in a movie, if James Bond decided to use the Force, everybody would just go, this is the dumbest thing in the world. That's why that last Indiana Jones movie was so horrific, because halfway through the movie, everybody said, oh no, we're going with aliens. Come on. It's a horrible decision. So I would be confusing my audience, just like if James Bond decided to use the Force to kill somebody. I mean, think of how horrible that would be if that happened.
Right. It would ruin James Bond.
Yeah, like the only way I could see that possibly playing is if you did it as your very, very last effect and left it sort of ambiguous. But even then, ambiguity is a lack of clarity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I've thought about it because I've presented myself. This is the kind of thing I do on my long drives and things like that. I'll think about how do I solve these little issues. And the best way that I could think about me doing that would be as a throwaway. That way I get credit for doing it, but I'm not saying this is my character. So I established myself as a card expert. I'm such a con man. I need every edge I can get. So I've looked into the dark arts, just to see how can I use this to take advantage of anybody. And I would say that one time somebody came up to me and challenged me. They said, one time on television, I saw a guy that could hold his hand over a deck of cards and a royal flush would come out. And so that's somebody challenging me, right? That's basically a heckler coming up to me. And this is me telling a story on stage, So I would say, well, nobody can do that. I mean, nobody can just float their hand over. I mean, if anybody could, it would look like this, but I can't do that. So I'm not going to bother doing it, And you would just simply do it as as a throwaway, as a beat. But look, I'm doing it as a joke. So it's my arrogant character saying, well, I can do that, but I'm not gonna.
So we've spoken about character, and we've spoken about sort of the why for an effect and maybe the context of the effect. The only other thing that I want to ask you about in terms of magical construction is the idea of a premise. And just before we dive into it, it's something that Tyler and I talk about a lot. And one thing that I learned, which is so crazy, is I was talking to, I think I had a phone call with people from the podcast, someone who listens to the podcast. And, every maybe 3 or 6 months, I call maybe like 10 people who listen to the podcast just to see where they're at and where. And one of the things that I found is, when I explained, well, the premise that you come up with, XYZ, XYZ, one of them said, the premise is that the coin disappears and appears here. And then someone else said, the premise is that I can do magic. And then someone else said, the premise is I can read and I'm going, does anybody know what a premise is? Is the clarity of language here being missed, and maybe premise can mean multiple things? And so let's start. We're going to get into a minute of the importance of a premise and how it maybe interweaves with your character and your why and things like that. But right off the bat, the best definition you've got, what's a premise?
Okay, great question. And you're right. We are lacking a little bit here in this department when it comes to magic. But here's what, let's use movies, for example, because it's very, very simple. The premise of a typical Bond movie is that some dude is out there trying to blow the world up, and Bond has to prevent that from happening. Okay, so that's the premise. The premise is that we've got an evil villain, and we've got some guy that wants to do good, and his journey, is going to be met with certain obstacles and things get in the way. But eventually, we're going to make that arc, and he's going to kill that villain and save the world. Right. So in a card trick, I may say that. I have where my brother is the one that takes my deck of cards from me and shuffles it all faces into backs and messes everything up. So that's my premise, is that the cards have been mixed and I need to fix those cards so that I can find the 4 selections or whatever, right? So that's your premise, a very broad version of what's happening. We're at point A, here's your starting point, here's B, this journey that you got to go, and C is your climax, right? Now, what magicians a lot of times do is they just start explaining, the journey itself. That's not the premise. So back to this Bond analogy. If I were to say, okay, well, the movie starts and the car pulls up and James Bond gets out and he walks into a big building, I'm not talking about the premise. I'm talking about the actual movie, the events in which they occur. So that's when a magician says, oh, well, I put the coin in this hand and then this happens and I put the glass here and all. That's not the effect.
Coin changes.
That's like the handling or something. That's the things that you're doing. But the overall premise should be, I want to demonstrate how it's possible to use sleight of hand or whatever to get this coin to disappear to here for this reason. You have to have a lot more depth.
Or I have a mystic ability and I can change coins. Or the number one reason I became a magician is so that I can be rich without working. Or inside my hand, I've hired a small team of fairies who work with me.
However, as ridiculous as that is, that's a premise. That is a premise.
Right.
Here's another really good one. People often ask me, the Donald Trump thing. He's always saying people to ask me this or people say that. Nobody's saying a single thing to him, okay? But but what he's using it is a springboard to do whatever he wants. And I use that one all the time. I love it. That's the easiest one. I get to walk up on stage and say, people often ask me, what's it like to cheat in a game or whatever, as far as the audience is concerned, they go, oh, I bet he does.
Oh, people do that. I wonder.
Yeah.
I was thinking that too.
Exactly. And then you start the universal experience thing. So if I were to say, hey, do you guys ever notice how a Type 2 stroke engine does this? You'd both go, well, no. But if I say, hey, you ever notice how I lose a sock in the laundry all the time? Everybody goes, oh, yeah, of course. That happens to me all the time.
So the difference between a premise and an effect is a premise is the context in which the effect takes place. And the effect is really a description of the beginning and the end result.
I'm saying, what is the thing that's happening here? What power do I possess? What is this? Once I know what that thing is, then I can start to craft the premise around it. But if you don't even know what your effect is, how can you possibly start to do the premise around it? And it also characters in there too. If you don't know what it's all related.
Yeah, one of the things that The answer that nobody wants, but is the answer, is you say like, how do I make this trick better? And the answer is, well, who are you as a person? You know, it's like, damn it. Like, I just wanted to make the trick better, but it is, right? Like, you and your character define the effects that you would choose, which relates to your abilities, which then lends all the way to the premise, which is why anybody should care about what's going on.
Brilliant. And not only that, that's a great example, a great answer for that, because I get this one a lot. How do I improve my poker game? But it's not one answer. It's so many things. So a nice way to kind of wrap up kind of a nice moment here is to talk about experience. You know, you need to be out there working on one of those things and then working on another one of those things, and, you know, premise or effect or character. You know, over time, it starts to get clearer, and you have to read Strongman. You just have to read that book. And that way you will start to apply some of those things, but you can't, just like what I said about the second deal earlier, you don't just take a 15-minute session on the second deal, learn it. I'm just going to work on the grip pressure. I'm going to screw up all the seconds, but I'm going to just work on grip pressure. Then you stop on grip pressure and say, okay, I'm going to work on just the brief. And then you work on that, but neither will be successful because you're focusing on different things for each one. But over time, you start to build each one of those departments up to par, and then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. So with this effect and character and premise and all this, you just need to go out there and start performing, but focusing on one element and start to understand it better, you know, and then work on something else and bring that understanding up. But eventually you'll get to the point where I can read a trick and go, this is garbage. And then read another one and go, this is garbage. And read a third one and go, hey, wait a minute. You know, I kind of like this thing here. And then you're at the beginning, you go, okay, well, how would my character justify it? Okay, well, what's the premise around this? What premise don't I have yet? That's another good.
And maybe even that moment where you're saying this is garbage, what you really mean is this is, I cannot undo the premise and effect of this and redo it to be anywhere near remotely something that I would do.
Yeah, and what I mean, let me just clarify that too. It's that it's not hitting on any cylinders. I don't like the character's no good. I can't tweak this in any way. This is just, it's unusable at this point. Yeah. So here's a good one. And not, again, never bashing anybody's material. It's something I'll see a lot is a trick that there's 18 effects going on at once. And that's where it gets really complex because we're looking for clarity. I want my audience to know, here's my ability. Here's the challenge I have. And the outcome could be this if I'm successful. And that's a nice, clear thing for public speaking. You know, here's the problems that we have in the world. Here's how I'm going to solve them. And now I'm going to recap what I just said, right? That's a nice, crystal clear thing. But in some of these effects you'll read or buy or whatever, your downloads, or it's like 19 things happening. So it's very difficult to break all that apart.
Even on a simpler level than that, you know, many years ago, and I think I realized, I was like, and I don't stick to this now, but I was like, the type of magic that I want to do is magic where at the end, where they know what's going to happen before it happens. And at the end, they saw it happen, even with all the tools that they could have. It's so much stronger than the opposite, which is you're doing something, and then you're like, and here's a result. And you're like, well, I thought we were cutting tens to see if you had 10 cards in each packet, not to see if you had tens on the top of the, right? Like you get such a stronger effect when they know what's coming and it happens.
It allows you to build tension and it's so rewarding to finally talk to somebody that because I have a very limited circle of people that I talk to because I have the problem with what you were talking about with can't explain effects and can't do this. And I get that, but it gets a good reaction thing. That's usually the end of a conversation when I hear that kind of thing. So, but what I'm saying is you're exactly right. If it just happens, I think about an explosion going. It's the Alfred Hitchcock thing. If something blows up across the street, it's pure chaos. It's pure chaos for 5-10 minutes. And then all of a sudden we need to think about, well, how did that happen? Who did it? Am I safe? Are my friends safe? We have to go backwards. We have to think backwards. And prior to that bomb going off the street, it's me sitting at my computer just messing around on Facebook. It's the most boring thing in the world, right? So think about that. Here's my 15-minute movie. 14 minutes of me watching Facebook, scrolling around, and then an explosion goes off across the street. Who's going to make it to the end of that video? Nobody. But at the very beginning, it's the Alfred Hitchcock quote. It's at the very beginning, I say, across the street, a bomb's going to blow up, but we don't know when it's going to go off. Probably within the next 10, 15 minutes or so. It will be pure chaos, and people will be glued to their TVs for the next 15 minutes. And then when it starts to blow and all the music goes away and the close-up of that, whatever that shot is, people will be on the edges of their seats. So that is the concept. You need to bring that into your magic.
And the question is often along that line, which has been discussed about that Hitchcock idea, is what you're going after, tension or surprise.
Right. Yeah,
and for me, it's tension. There's people who it's surprise, and maybe they find ways for it to make it work for them, whatever. For me, the best moment in my performance is the second and a half before ta-da, because that is the moment where all faces are glued to what's going on. The seats are on the edge. I want that second to last 5 minutes.
Well, let me give you a little something that I enjoy that moment. I know that moment well. Now, we get that nice moment where we're about to say, but that could only mean one thing. And the audience goes, you got to be kidding me. Now, you need to put something that's not your fault in the way that prevents you from just going for it. Does that make sense? So when I bring out the zippered case, the zipper is hard for me to get my hand on. So I'm fumbling with it, and I turn the first zipper, but now I have to reposition my hand so that I can get the second part of the zipper because my hand's in the way. But I grab it intentionally so that I can only get the zipper halfway because my hand's in the way. So that means I have to re-grip it with my other hand. I have to grab the zipper again, but just at 3/4 of the way through, my hand falls off the zipper. It's a little tiny zipper. It's hard to get my hands on it. I turn it around. And then, of course, when you open it up, the keys are in the way, right? That's on purpose. Right. And then one by one, the keys fall off, right? So I've bought myself I've made that 1.5 seconds you talk. I've made that 15 seconds now. Mm-hmm. And it's not my fault. It would be very frustrating for your audience if you're like, slowly walking to the card on the table. So put things in the way that are not your fault. Yeah. So nesting boxes is a real simple on the top of my mind example, but you get the idea where, and don't make it too long. Don't make this stupid large, but what the point is that Hitchcock uses it all the time. If you notice when the guy with the knife's walking up the stairs, he'll get a sleeve caught on the edge of the banister, or his foot slips off. Right. There's little things that end up in the way that expand that moment. And great suspense directors, Fincher and goes, they know how to put little annoying things like the key. It's the wrong key. Yeah. He gets up there and he puts it's got to be the other one, and he puts that one and he drops the key at the last second. And meanwhile, on the other side of the door, the guy is just I hate to make this podcast so dark, but somebody's killing somebody or something, and we're struggling with watching that, and that's when you hear that one guy in the theater go, "Pick up the damn keys." Saving Private Ryan. If you watch Saving Private Ryan, at the very end, there's that one scene where the young kid doesn't have the courage to speak up, and the other guy's walking up the stairs at the end. If you haven't seen the movie, please go see it. It's just a mind-bending movie. But what I'm talking about with the suspense thing is happening at the end of that movie. There's a guy slowly walking up the stairs, and he just takes his time, and the other guy's so nervous, and it makes you get up off your couch and scream at the TV. And that's what we're trying to do. What you can get out of your audience by just a basic card trick.
I never even thought about that. There's 2 points that really resonate with me of what you guys were just talking about. The first is that is an amazing tip. It's almost adding a surprise factor to the suspense. Like they're like, and he turns the card. Oh, he dropped it. Oh, it was the right card. You know what I mean? Like it gives you a little extra shock before the actual reveal happens.
Yes, but let me say one thing. You have to be very, 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 very careful in this moment, too, because it's such a delicate moment. So anything that you do that could impact the method or things like that, right? So it is a very delicate space. So you really have to be careful with that space.
Yeah.
And I've learned that the hard way, too, by thinking, let me do it this way. And then all of a sudden people come back and say, I know. You switched it or something along those lines. So each trick has its own context and journey. So you'll find a little moment when it pops up and say, "Ooh, you know what I'll do is I'll put this here intentionally
in a Ziploc,
so that it takes a little bit longer to get out because that moment is so special." That's why I look for those moments. Now, I could with the suspense thing. I'll plug one trick that's in my book. It's already been released, but it follows this template where I talk about cutting out 4 aces from a shuffle deck in less than 60 seconds. So I've already pinned myself against the clock and said, pitted myself against the clock. I say 4 aces, 60 seconds. And if I can't do that, I give this guy a couple $100 and I shake his hand, So all of a sudden it's, well, okay, And then, of course, the clock. Oh, I say, as a matter of fact, instead of the aces, I'll do 4 cards that you guys pick, right? So then I have 8 cards to find in 60 seconds. So you can only imagine that when that clock starts ticking down, the tension starts building when I get to 40 seconds and 50 seconds. And I've only found like 3 cards, So at the very end, it all works out. But I'm telling you, in those last 5 seconds, people are flipping out because they realize I'm about to lose. And what happens just before the clock hits 0? I come out with the wrong card. It's a mistake. Like it's obviously not going to work anymore. And that creates an amazing amount of tension. And of course, the 4 selections that I was hunting for turn out to be the 4 aces. So I end up following through with my original premise, and the con man in me, it doesn't have to pay anybody. Now, contrast that trick to no stopwatch and coming out and saying nothing and saying, I want to cut out some cards here. You pick 4 cards and here they are. And now they're aces. You get your golf clap, you get your polite little, oh, that was nice.
And you did the thing we all thought you could do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And think about this. If I find the first one, and then I find the second one, and then I find the third one, is there any question I'm going to find the fourth one? I've just done it 3 times in a row. It is the exact opposite of what you want people to think. But if you use progression and the suspense techniques and all this other stuff, I'm running out of time. It keeps getting harder and harder. Each one is a mystery, and that concept turns a simple card trick of just a basic 4 cards changing into another 4 cards into this thing that people will remember, and they're on the edges of their seats. And I did this trick recently, and the woman that was watching the clock, she was shaking her hands around like, I can't do this. I'm like, lady, I'm the one doing the work. I had you to watch the watch, And so she just couldn't handle the amount of tension. And think about it. It was my money on the line. But it just proves that adding premise, effect, character, and thinking about those things will make your magic 20, 30, 50, 100 times stronger. And man, that is the impact that you're looking at.
The other thing I wanted to mention, it's going back quite a ways, but I was actually having this conversation with a non-magician who was asking me about the more theoretical and artistic sides of magic. And I was talking about a presentation that Jonah does pretty regularly, which is he does a hypothetical setup to a trick. And I think it's one of the strongest pieces of magic that I see him perform. Because like you just say, imagine this is what's going to happen. And they just follow along, not really, they're not like, okay, I'm going to get you or whatever. They're like, okay, yeah, if that happened. And then, okay, yeah, I could see that happening. Oh yeah, if all those things happened, it would be impossible. And the whole time you're just sort of pantomiming the actions, but legitimately doing them. And then the impossible thing happens. Like you're like, it would be impossible if the card you named was the one you cut to.
Yeah, that's just all well thought out. Yeah. There's lots of little premises, ideas like that, too, that I've just borrowed from storytelling and movies and things. And it reminds me of another good inspiration if you're looking for this character development or a good template or a good character person to watch do this well. It's not a magician. It's who's the Food Network guy? Alton Brown? Is that his name?
Yeah. Alton Brown.
Yes, he can talk about a grilled cheese sandwich, and you're at home like with popcorn watching it, and with saucer eyes. You're so fascinated. If he's going to talk about a grilled cheese sandwich, he doesn't say, "Well, here's a grilled cheese sandwich that's good." His opening line is, in 1615, the king from such and such invaded this country and his troops, and it's this like fascinating story. And then he talks about all this other stuff, and you're saying, well, the grilled cheese thing is the most fascinating thing in the world. And next thing you know, he finishes the show by eating it, enjoying it. So that is another way that you can, be this storyteller and this interesting character. But if you do your character work right and your homework and your premises and all that other stuff, you become such a more fascinating person. Your canvas is so much bigger. Yeah, so that's the thing. So getting people to understand that concept, that's really my goal when I do my Skype lessons or when I lecture or these conventions. I really want to make people, I'm not saying my stuff is the best stuff ever. I mean, it kind of is. But I want to say, look at your own material and do what I did. If you do coins or kids magic or illusion stuff, see if you can find ways to just take that similar approach and get people to bring them in closer. And that way you can have a lot more of a connection with your audience if they're fascinated by these things that you've done. And you've made your canvas so much bigger by bringing in character and bringing in premise and all this other stuff. And people will walk away talking about you, not that thing you did. Because if you listen to people after your show and they say, like, dude, it was in my hand. Those are the kind of things you'll hear if you're just doing these moment kind of magic things.
Right.
But if it's the other one, they'll talk about you. They'll say, that guy was amazing. I couldn't imagine they let him into casinos. I couldn't imagine they do this. And they'll remember you as a person. And that's going to get, I'm telling you, that will get your name out there.
So we're getting to the point where we're starting to wrap up the episode. And at the end, we have a few wrap-up questions, which I don't have with me. So Tyler, I need your help. But the first of them is the question of the week. So every week, the guest gets to ask a question. It can be anything from a question that you want the answer to, the thousands of magicians listen, or it could be a question that you want magicians to ask themselves, given the opportunity. So what's your question of the week?
Boy, I can go real cliche here, but what we talked about with the, know who you are kind of thing like that. I want people to examine themselves and say, who am I? Am I a magician that's dabbled in the dark arts? Am I, someone that I can read people's minds, but I don't really understand it, Or am I somebody that I know this, I have this ability, I'm confident, I'm a killer, I can do these things, let me demonstrate my power. Are you an expert in some field? Is it gambling? Is it sleight of hand? Ask yourself, who are you? Who are you and what are you doing? And is that consistent with the work that you're currently doing? I could do a kick-ass linking rings, but that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. It's just so far off the map. It has nothing to do with anything. So who are you? And is it?
I love it.
And is it consistent with the work that you're doing? If you're a comedy magician and you're just up there having fun, getting laughs and doing the magic doesn't really matter, you're getting laughs. Well, if you're 90% comedian and you're just using magic as kind of a thing to hold the show together, then fine, you're doing it. Because you asked yourself, who are you? And you said, I'm a comedian. And are you making people laugh? And is it consistent with the work? Then yes, you don't have to be following strict, crazy theory for all of these things that we've talked about. It's working. So just ask yourself that kind of a thing.
Love it. So the next one is we just did question of the week. So this is PSA. It's very similar, but it can just be sort of a definitive statement. Anything you think the magic community needs to hear. What's your public service announcement for our listeners?
Oh, I've got it. I just have to word it the right way. And that is just, you have to really watch your online criticisms of other people's work and things like that on an online forum, because somebody puts their stuff out there. And I'm not saying for me, I've had heckler. The online stuff I get is hilarious. These people telling me to take my videos down because I'm so bad, and I read them and laugh. But there's other kids out there that are much younger, and it's a form of bullying, and that person put it up there. If they're asking for their help, have some back to the mentoring thing. Have some positive, critique of it. Say, maybe try it this way or something. But saying that you're the worst performer ever, or you're garbage or whatever, you should go away. Don't post on our thing, or those types of things. So just soften that up a little bit. And if the person asks for some help, you can provide it. But certainly don't go around saying everything is the worst. You're terrible. You're this, and if you watch something and it's bad, post a video of you doing it. Say, here's how I do it, and soften those things up. Because I see some younger people coming on the scene that I think are just getting really beat up online sometimes. I read some really hurtful comments.
It can be hard to stay in magic the first time you mess up a trick live. You know what I mean? So let alone having people from the community, your peers, tear you apart. We want to grow it, right?
Be careful where you post your stuff. And if you see something that needs improvement, don't go after the guy in a negative way. Offer some positive.
Also send him a private message. Then there's no harm.
And what else is nice is actually having some weight to your comment by showing the right way. Because how many people write to me and say, I have the worst bottom deal on the planet. Well, can you show me what I'm doing? And they can't. There's no proof of it. It's an empty account with no name. There's no videos. It's just like someone that they use to troll something. So, but if I got a comment back from somebody, which has happened one time, the one time I say, okay, bro, show me. And this guy sends me back flawless bottoms, and I'm like, okay, well, all right, point made. So, with the longer you've been in the arena and you understand it, the more power your comment has, and it just seems like if you're at the top of the food chain, the last thing you're doing is going on social media and ripping people apart. You usually have more important things to do.
One of the next things is we each go around and we mention something that we thought was particularly important from the episode. So all three of us reflect, because people have been listening to this for over an hour now, and hopefully pull one take-home point for them. So for me, I really loved, and I think we've spoken to other people on the podcast about it, but the Hitchcock comparison and thinking about tension and those moments. I love the idea of putting obstacles in the way at the end. And just more than anything, these things, these ideas of tension and these ideas of the moments that we want to add to, and these how to introduce a premise and effect. And this is why this podcast exists, right? Like that's the stuff that I love. That's the stuff that it's made out of for me. So it's very nice to dive in and talk about. I mean, we talk about a lot of different things on this podcast, but it was very nice to get nitty gritty into theory. That was really good for me. Theory. Tyler, what about you?
So Theory, really enjoyed the. It's kind of tied into what you said. They just said you want one. It's usually one takeaway point. There's a few things that I really gravitated towards, but just that right when we were talking about the Alfred Hitchcock stuff. Right around there when you mentioned the idea of putting in an obstacle at the end, it was so eye-opening for me, because the type of magic that I do is very sort of haphazard, and I'm making a lot of mistakes, and it sort of gets muddled and isn't very clear. And I love this idea of like, you can build the impossible moment of, oh, no. And then there's just one little extra step that makes them, you freak out. You're like, you're next in line. And then they say, we'll be back in 5 minutes. And you're just like, come on, let me in. I want to go. Let me see it. And I just think that's such a powerful tool that I'm very excited to experiment with.
All of those things that are in the way are there on purpose. You can't have a bulldozer come into your show just because. And Jay said I wanted an interruption right before the no. You pull from whatever your premise was. If your premise was your older brother giving you a tough time, and his older brother and his friends, of course, every time you try to do something, either the brother or the older friends interject and screw you up. So your interruptions are coming from a consistent place, consistent with premise.
Jason, is there something from the episode that you think is particularly important, or something that you think is a nice take-home point to sum up?
Yeah, there was a nice moment in there when you asked me about premise and effect and character, and I said I'd have to go back and listen to it. But basically, I got what usually takes me an hour to explain to somebody, all down to like one nice little sentence. I mean, it touched on kind of all the moments and said, here's my approach to magic.
And this should remind you the importance of scripting, because that was ad-libbed, and who knows how if that was scripted in the future, you'd be able to say it that quick always, and that effectively always. And at the end, this wouldn't be an hour and a half; it would be 40 minutes, and all of our questions would be tight, and the answer would be tight. The jokes,
the underbrush, we call that underbrush. The underbrush is all cut away,
right,
and all of a sudden it's just pure content. That's what your script is. When you start out, it's just whatever, and then all of a sudden it just gets refined and refined. But a good character has to be able to deliver like that beautiful shaped content is just coming out off the cuff. And that's why, when I get from other magicians saying to me, you had to have been off script there. And I said, no, that joke's been there for years. Yeah, exactly. So it's just how it works.
The second last wrap-up question is what we call the endless chain of magicians. So we have each guest come on and recommend a potential future guest for the podcast, with the only caveat being you have to have their contact information in order to put us in touch with them. So who do you think we should talk to?
Well, I mean, Darwin Ortiz would be a great example. Yeah,
he's on the list. He's coming up soon.
Now, I'll throw some other names at you. A very good friend of mine, Tony Cabral. I don't know if you've had, or Antonio Cabral, if you've had him before. That would be my number one. If Darwin's already on the list, then go with Tony. Andrew Wimhurst is another great example. Jack Carpenter. I don't know if you've reached out to Jack yet. Yeah. These are all Mike Vincent. I think, didn't you just have you had Mike Vincent on?
No, we have not yet. All of those are fresh names that'll be coming on.
Yeah, those are that's my little squad there that we share ideas and concepts, and we are a tight little family.
And the last section of the podcast is plugs. I know you have a book coming out soon, and I know we didn't even mention this, but the videos that you upload are fantastic. And I just wanted to say this in passing, but everyone else uploads videos of them doing stuff with cards, and It's what Tyler and I jokingly call crotch magic. Like the videos of their crotch with just a deck of cards over it. And then your videos are beautiful, multi-angles at a table. There's
clean audio. It's great.
Scotch and the audio is clean and beautiful. So anyways, I just want to say that in saying, we've seen a lot of the videos that are about the upcoming book that is coming out and some of the magic that's up on your YouTube page from that book. So talk a little bit about what the book is and what sort of things people can find in it and where they can find it.
All right. So the book is called Game Changer, and it's a continuation of my first book, which was Confident Deception. So Confident Deceptions, my approach to creating a magic book was I looked at magic books and said, what's wrong with all the books that I have already? Small photos. I don't like the effects. There's filler. There's no photos. There's descriptions I had to read. There's sentences or paragraphs I had to read 10 times to figure out what's going on here. So I said, I want a book that's crystal clear. I want big photos. I want color photos. I want good, strong content. I want to feel like this is all within reach. If you're willing to work on some stuff, it's within reach and it's practical. It's like a regular deck. Let's go, So, and what we talked about this whole premise or this whole podcast, every trick has all the work done for you. The effect is crystal clear. The premise is there. The obstacles are there. All the beats and moments are all flushed out. So it's finished, polished material. So it's never anything I thought of and then published, So Game Changer is a continuation of that. It's just this more of the same. But I got to say, honestly, I feel like it's even better. I've learned more over the last 5 years. And I've put that more work into the material. I've performed it more than the stuff in Confident Deception. So there's a lot more polish in this book, I believe. Plus, it's 350 pages. I think it's nearly twice as big as the last one. Yeah. And we went to town on the photos. The last book got a lot of critical acclaim for the nice colored photos. This time, they're even better. I brought in a different camera guy who's done work with big celebrities, ESPN, Shaquille O'Neal. He's like works with major television companies. And it's just knowing the right people sometimes is great. So he loves magic. He came in and he shot this stuff with, one of them like $20,000 cameras with the 9-foot lens on, So, it's like you can see the pores in it's remarkable, the photos that went into this book.
And where and when can people get it?
So we're trying. Do not. I can't say this in concrete here, but we are trying to have it ready for Magic Live, which I'm performing in the close-up room there. So what happened is the final proof went to the printers like a month and a half ago, and we're not in control of when they come. So
you just fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a limited run first, like how they send you a proof sometimes. So we're trying to get like 50, 100 copies or something up front, and then let the remaining the bulk of the order come afterwards. So it may be there. We would like it to be, but it may not. So no matter what, it's going to be another month and a half or something before the book is released. It'll be available through Magic or Vanishing Ink, of course, and all of you'll be able to buy it on any Penguin and Murphy's and all that stuff. So and through my website, of course, Card Magic by Jason.
Beautiful. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking with us about everything under the sun, and particularly, like I mentioned in the wrap up, but it just being a fantastic episode for people who are here at the podcast because they love theory and they love intricate details. And just the one reminder that I have for people that are listening to this, as usual, but the reminder is that these are incredible ideas, that have come from years of knowledge. But listening to this episode and going, right, premise doesn't do anything. Right? You have to actually then say, oh, premise, and then sit down with a piece of paper and start working through stuff. Or, oh, character, sit down. And the way that Jason very quickly started naming off the actual characters that he is a reference to. He's like, oh, James Bond, and this guy, and the guitar store guy, and this guy that was good with girls, all these different people. Put down who are the people who make up your character and what are the premises, and actually put the work in. Because otherwise, having this knowledge but not applying it is just as useful as not having the knowledge at all. So go home, apply the knowledge, and there's plenty of information in this episode to launch people into or deeper into that journey. I was thinking about saying this. I'll say it. There's enough in this episode that if you just start working on this theory, that's all you have to do. Well, call me in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's enough. It's all in here. It's all in here. So
Yeah.
just start doing some of the things. And with that, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all of your fantastic knowledge.
That was a real pleasure talking to you.
Well, I had a great time too, and it's refreshing to have a podcast that is about exactly the things that I like to talk about versus just, you know, what's going on and how you doing today, that kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun to discuss the real meat and potatoes of it. All right.
Well, thank you so much. And again, to the people at home, big thank you. And we will see you all next Thursday. Well, there you go, episode 120 with Jason Ladanye. Like I said at the very end of the episode, but everything you need to know about theory is basically contained in this episode. If you work on just the things in this episode, you have at least 10 years worth of work to do to make your magic better. And that's what this whole podcast is about, is getting better and becoming better at magic. Not just doing magic, but doing magic well. So, re-listen to it, take some notes, or sit down with a cup of tea and start working on your own stuff and start working to make your magic better. And otherwise, we'll see you Thursday.